If you're reading the title of this video and want to get to the answer, it's build a long gun that's 26 inches long overall length and a barrel 18 inches long or longer. Make them much longer if you really want to avoid any kind of argument or discussion. And make it a standard break action, very conventional looking gun that would be mistaken easily for being a 10 gauge or something. And make the barrel out of 1-inch pipe that has the seam removed and has the ends, both ends, altered so where you can chamber a flare cartridge, the standard 26.5 millimeter flare cartridge for a depth of 9 inches. Make sure it's a taper to where it goes into the normal central bore because you've just built a 105 caliber firearm. There, that's the answer. I'll explain it in a minute. Just answering questions with Waptec. Here we go. A corbay in 45 Colt or 410, or both in some cases, is nice and all, but do gunsmiths have a book on these flare guns? Do they have the build schematics? Is it possible for them or you to replicate them for functional use? Any thoughts on making these? I would love something to have that can fire flares and 12 gauge shells and other rounds all the way down to 22 LR. I haven't bought it yet. I do plan on buying it in the future. It would be great at the ranch I stay on. And I bring gunsinternational.com, the website, into play about a Frigson FS4 Skeet 4 gauge set with extra barrels for 410, 28 gauge, 20 gauge, and 12 gauge. Gun ID, string of numbers. I'll try to make it a short name. What the hell are you going on about? Okay, I'm in the United States, and depending on where you're standing and what day of the week it is, and actually even what season it is, very importantly, you are or are not allowed to make, keep, and bear arms of specific calibers, they call it. It's actually chamberings, for specific cased ammunition. Now, there's an exception and an exemption to this, depending on what you do, for everything you come up with. The universal answer for all of this, and even the ATF has spilled the beans on this a long time ago, if you don't want us knocking down your door, make something extremely conventional, boring, that doesn't have any feature that we even list as a feature to consider on whether or not regulations would happen. We're not talking about $200 tax stamps or 10-year prison times. We're talking about people just mistaking it for something dangerous. So here's the rule. A 10-gauge shotgun and a 4-gauge shotgun have very different characteristics, but visually you can make one look like the other and make it to where no one will even give it a second look by making it a conventional, dumb-looking, break-action, classic Elmer Fudd complaint shotgun. I don't care that it can fire something that can take out literally a tank. I don't care that it can fire something that was used to take out a tank by a certain group of people we're not supposed to mention, Nazis. We're not discussing that. We're also not discussing them somehow converting flare guns into firing, yes, explosive rockets, and it being obviously a destructive device listed by the National Firearms Act. If you make it conventionally a 4-gauge shotgun, even though they're not allowed for hunting most places, for anything that flies, they're still allowed for shooting moose. There aren't any restrictions on them as long as they're a long gun. Long guns are 26 inches long overall length or longer and have an 18-inch long barrel or longer. And immediately someone in the comments section, if they even bother posting it, it's going to do a glowy comment, well, it's only that way if you don't rifle them or some other bullshit term. No, none of those are true. Period. Yeah, but I don't want to hear it. Yes, there's a definition for any other weapon and firearm and a bunch of other definitions you can cite and misquote and mislead people into breaking the law, and you get your, $50 for that getting somebody to commit a crime. Have fun being glowy in the comment section. I did a video about glowies recently. Is this a glowy question someone left? No. But even if it is, I'm going to straight-faced answer it as if it is by saying how to avoid the ATF or your local laws. Unless you're in a state that forbids you from making your own firearm, which there are many, Oregon isn't one of them, and I'm in Oregon, you can build a conventional break-action, single-shot, auto-nothing. It's manually cocked and manually fired gun. That's the end of it. There is no step 3 or whatever. underpants gnomes. So, why would I recommend this instead of building a flare gun? Because depending on which county you're in, actually not the states, some counties make it illegal to make a flare gun because someone made one and started a fire, or someone made one and ended up shooting themselves by accident. So they made a law against it. I can't even count how many counties there are, so I'm not going to look. So let's bring up the actual answer here. Are you allowed to make a flare gun? If it's, believe it or not, a 4-gauge, a big freaking bore, 105 caliber, legal. Making a 12-gauge, if you make the barrel entirely out of plastic, again, legal, but it has to have a 2-inch limited chamber, even though it could obviously take a short shell, mini shells. But legally speaking, if you make it out of metal, it has to be bigger than conventional shotgun shells. Could you easily cheat and convert it over and blah, blah? Yeah, obviously. But the idea is that it's built and intended as a signaling device. That way the ATF says they don't want to regulate it. Then the fact, if you ever got a hold of a real 4-gauge shell that's 4 inches long or 4.5 inches long, a real one, which the dimensions for them aren't even available because nobody makes them. They just make flare cartridges, which are dramatically smaller. If you got one and loaded it, it fired it out of what would basically be a handgun, it would really, really take your arm off if you loaded it with a real shotgun shell load. That's why nobody does that. They just build a flare gun and then just misuse the cartridges to fire shot illegally. And after they fire it, it's empty and there's no evidence, and that's how they break a law, if they want to. And they do it once or twice and they never do it again, because even when you do that, even though it's slightly the wrong size and smaller, it still almost takes your hand off. Shooting the equivalent to a true elephant gun, but it's a pistol, please don't do that. Now, the other one is, some of them will make a muzzle loader. Muzzle loaders are completely unregulated. You can make them any short type, rifled or not, it doesn't matter. Yes, someone in the comment section is going to talk about rifling or you know, your inalienable rights that we keep having to discuss in the legal system, which means they are not inalienable. Right to vote? Oh, you don't care about that. Okay, so let's go over this again. Do you want to be able to fire everything from 12 gauge down to 22 LR, and also I would recommend also 17 HMR. It's literally a pellet gun barrel converted over to fire real cartridges. You can make these as subcaliber adapters that fit into a 12 gauge, and then make a 12 gauge barrel literally, not with much effort, fit into a flare gun long gun. Yes, you can technically use the short flare gun and convert it to a 12 gauge if it's a long barrel. Yada yada. Don't. Just build the thing as a long gun. Say it's a 4 gauge. Don't even mention flares. And obviously just make it to where it just does flares, because you have nothing you have to do with the pipe except maybe sanding it a little bit to get the cartridge to fit. And then after that you can convert it down to anything you want to. This is also known as a universal lower receiver or test gun in the subculture I'm in on the internet, because what they do is you build a flare gun without the buttstock, make a really long barrel at that point, call it a firearm, and then mount it permanently by welding it to a bench and using that mechanism so you can put in your barrel adapters and fire shotgun shells all the way down to rifle cartridges safely. And if it blows to hell, who cares? You've just destroyed something you built out of random sheet metal plates that you screwed together or maybe welded and made it into a firing mechanism that you fire using a bicycle cable and a bicycle hand grip. It's literally it. This is right up my wheelhouse. I'm not even sure where we should go with the euphemisms here. So again, if you make it a long gun, preferably a generic butt-stocked long gun, it'll be the second most unregulatable item on the planet if you make it over 26 inches long and have a longer barrel than 18 inches. Now let's discuss that firearm design. It's a pistol grip version of the same thing. Again, almost entirely unregulatable. In fact, it's the least regulatable thing on earth because it doesn't fall under shotgun rules because it doesn't have the buttstock. It's not a rifle because it doesn't have a buttstock. It's not a pistol because you made the barrel too long and you have to hold it with 2 hands. It's in that gray area where the ATF decided to call them firearms, and they're less regulated. They have a lot of restrictions removed, including, quote, the barrel length. If it's built that way from the beginning, you're allowed to put a short barrel on it. But only, ironically, pistol calibers below 50 caliber don't do this. And or a flare gun barrel that's 105 caliber. Now, why is that significant? Gray area here. Technically, you can put a subcaliber adapter on it that's only under 50 cal and fire pistol cartridges out of it and rifle cartridges. But because the ATF wants that not to be legal, even though they said it overtly that it's legal and then tried to walk it back for now 20 years, they're going to want desperately, like a rat wants a block of cheese, to take you to court over it, just to harass the crap out of you. So to avoid it, even though the pistol grip only mechanism and stuff is almost impossible for them to have an objection to, they hate that they acknowledge that. And that will aggravate them. So if you like thumbing your nose at people who can throw you in prison for 10 years without really having a valid reason to do it and get away with it, fine. Otherwise, just build a standard 4-gauge shotgun and say you're going to use it for moose hunting. That's it. And make it flare gun type. Say, yeah, I'm using the flare shells because I can get them. They're aluminum, they'll fire. Just make it to where it has every single characteristic, copying the shell by reaming it out exactly. Next, can you get a gunsmith to do this? Oh, holy hell, you don't want to do that. Number one, they'll charge a bunch of money. Number two, build schematics consists of find flare gun, copy it, and put a buttstock on it. Or don't. Again, if you like thumbing your nose and going to prison. Again, it's not illegal. That doesn't stop them from throwing you into a jail cell. I would love something that can fire flares. A 12-gauge can do that. And 12-gauge shells. Again, 12-gauge can do that. And everything all the way down to 22 LR, etc. Again, subcaliber adapters and a 12-gauge. Make it conventional long gun. Put a buttstock on it. Make it Elmer Fudd looking. Boring. But if you want to be able to fire the flares that are bigger, that means you build a 4-gauge version of the same thing and either A, put a subcaliber 12-gauge in it, which again is not legally a problem, or just have a barrel change out. On GunsInternational.com's website, they have a gun lower receiver that can take a conversion from anywhere from 410 up to 12 gauge. 41 caliber up to, 12 gauge is basically 73 caliber. And it will do 4 gauge as well, which is 105 caliber. So it's basically the lower receiver is just a break action gun, and it can be double barrel, single barrel. So, also I would point out that many gun makers, aka gunsmiths, will avoid doing any of this because they don't want you to do anything. If you mention that you're going to put a subcaliber adapter in it, the ATF can just take their licensing from them without any cause. I didn't do anything illegal. Yeah, but we can get away with punishing you anyway. Because they'll do that. Gunsmiths get their licensing threatened quite literally every year. Because the ATF likes having somebody to pick on. That's why amateur home gunsmiths are something they hate, because they do not have the legal right to regulate it at all. Because it was decided a while ago that people making their own firearms is something the ATF can't touch unless it's something illegal. And if it even looks a little illegal, they flip out. So make it very Elmer Fudd compliant. Don't make it a pistol grip only, firearm, even though that's even less regulatable, because now they've got a hissy fit over it. Oh my God, over at ATF. So for functional use, making one from scratch, using schematics, just use a really hefty, let's say a 10 gauge body, and just make a 4 gauge barrel for it. So you can buy, end result, you can buy a flare gun and just own it and have fun with it. You can also make copies of them. It's not illegal at all. Unless you're in certain cities or counties where they've decided, since somebody made one and caused a fire or shot themselves in the balls, they made a law against it. Unless you're in one of those places, and you have to inquire with the police if it's legal for you to make a flare gun that fires the big flares like you do at sea. Are you allowed to make one? If you make one completely standard, are they going to have a problem with it? Again, just like the ATF, if the police say they don't want you to do it, they're going to find an excuse to break the law to keep you from doing it. If they don't have a problem with it, or if there's no law in the books, you can. But again, just start with a lower body of like a break action 10 gauge and build it up for 4 gauge or whatever. That's your real answer to the question. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that. And I'll try to give you a short URL below to highlight, cut, paste, and load. So you can look at a pretty one that costs thousands probably. Again, the gunsmith's going to be expensive, or they're going to be worried about going to prison or losing their license, which may be worse.